All right, we are back. Nice to have you with us for this January 2nd, 1992. My, how time flies. Does it not, State Senator Brian Lees?
Right by.
Republican
right by.
East Longmeadow? In case you feel like the heat gets too heavy, put that on.
Go after me?
You used to be, you have to worry about me when I was on radio with you. Now I think you just got to worry about the crew. I don't think you have anything to worry about with me. They say I've had somewhat of a lobotomy since I've entered the television
field.
field.
Toned down a little
Aren't I
bit.
toned down a little bit? I mean,
That's
you used to
right.
review my radio shows and tell me everything I did wrong. Am I okay on television thus far?
All right. You're doing all right. I agree with you that those drivers in the passing lane ought to either
get out of the left
or
lane.
get out.
Right.
That was good, show.
Because I'm sure you're speeding on the way to Boston most days. That's a real drag, isn't it? I mean, think about it. How many miles do you actually put on down and back from the Pike?
Well, every day we put over 200 miles on the car. People don't realize the Western Mass legislators, we come home every night.
Yep.
We have events in the district, whether it in my district or any of the surrounding districts that people represent. And that's tough. I mean, we're on the road over 2 hours down, over 2 hours back. Plus, we have to do things in the district, plus do business down there. It's a real drag. And we're, you know, the speed limit now is going to go up in 3 days.
Well, perhaps we can put into the new legislative years some extra funds, say, for chauffeurs, Lincoln Continental, something like that up and down the Pike.
Well, that wouldn't be something I would support. But
hey, you do get free tolls, right?
No, we do not. We have to pay for tolls.
I thought you got free tolls.
No, we do not get
You don't kind of flash the badge and say, I'm out of here?
No, I mean, you can buy anybody, and we are, like everybody else, you can buy a turnpike pass for a year if you have a number of people in your car, but when you're individually alone, you have to pay the toll.
There's no travel perk for a state legislator?
Well, you do get travel mileage, but it's not at the rate of the federal government anymore. It's been way outdated. It is a problem for some people in Western Mass. I mean, I have a car that's less than 2 years old. It's got 54,000 miles on it. Oh, wow. And I mean, nothing wrong with 54,000 miles, but in another year and a half, it'll have over 100,000. And then you've got to worry about the safety and things like that. I was in an accident once on the highway coming back because, you know, it was late. We'd been all-night session, and it just happened. Those things happen. So you got to... I don't think sometimes people realize quite what it takes for a Western Mass legislator. People in Boston go home for dinner and come back. Right. We can't do that. But we're not here to really talk about the driving.
I'm feeling pretty sorry for him by now, aren't you, folks?
I'm not here to complain at all. We know what the job is getting into it.
Let's take a look at what happened in 1991. Year-end legislation, a couple of things that did get through. Workers' compensation, police consolidation, hospital financing, and this one stuck through without not a lot of attention, and it certainly got a lot of attention when it happened, the furlough payback. Let's go point for point real quick and see if we can discuss some of these major issues. Workman's comp is something, or workers' comp, as I was told. Right. It used to be workmen's comp.
Right,
now it's workers'
compensation.
Brenda, who puts those things up for me, indicated to me that, of course, I was living in the 50s and I ought to wake up or she would boot me one. It is workers' compensation. That's something I know you have worked a lot on, and there's not a lot of, how would you say, high glamour, except for, say, the business people who I'm sure are happy that there's some reform.
Well, it isn't. I mean, this has been one of my priorities since I've been in the legislature, is rehauling workers' comp. In my mind, it's the biggest jobs bill we have ever passed in the legislature in the last several years because many businesses were moving out. We've lost over 300,000 jobs in the last 20 months in Massachusetts, and one of the main reasons when people left, they said workers' compensation costs were too high. We had a system that was well above that in the nation. We had to restructure it, make it fair to the worker and to the employee.
So give me a bullet point. What is the major reform that we're talking about here?
Well, what we have done is we've beefed up the fraud unit to take that out of it. Everybody knows there's a number of people that shouldn't be on comp. We have developed a system to have light duty to people be able to come back. We've changed the temporary system from 12 years down to approximately 6 years. In 6 years, if you aren't better, then you should move on to long-term or permanent disability. We had a temporary system that went out 12 years. No one thinks 12 years is a temporary situation. Mm-hmm. We have restructured some of the benefits, changed those slightly, and there is some concern with some people that they may not get as much as they did in the past. It's not a retroactive bill, but we had to make ourselves competitive in some sense with other states. We had numbers of companies moving over the border just to avoid
No
our
question.
workers.
Well, what about
So
rates? That's the important thing to the business.
the business community was going to have a 46% increase. Now, with this new bill, they will have no increase. We will be held harmless for this year, and hopefully when all the reforms are able to click in and we'll really see some savings, we'll have a reduction of 5 to 10% in the next year to year and a half.
How does that compare to other states, industrial states?
Well, we're still one of the more generous, but we're more in line now. We will probably be a little higher than average, but not the top one.
While there's no increase coming for this year, it still is an enormous nut for business people to have to get over. I mean, some folks in the last 3, 4, 5 years have seen 100, 200, 300% increases in their workmen's compensation.
Easily in the last several years they've seen that, and we're hoping that with this bill we'll begin to reduce that and make them again more competitive. Some companies were losing all of their profits to workers' compensation increases, and they said no more. And that's why this bill passed. There was a good deal of controversy about it. It wasn't an easy decision in every area, but I think we've done a good job. The one thing that I don't like, the lawyers still have a pretty powerful lobby. We were not able to get to them the way that we should have.
Okay, quickly, police consolidation and hospital financing. What about those two things?
Well, in the long term, they're designed to save money. Hospital financing bill is a very complicated bill, but what it's doing is making more competition amongst the hospitals, opening the system up, so hopefully in the long run we can lower some costs. But also, so many hospitals have bad debt for people that don't pay, or in emergency rooms, they have to take people that come through the door that don't have any insurance. We've got a better system set up to handle that. From police consolidation, we had 4 police departments in the Commonwealth: Registry Police, State Police, Capitol Police, and MDC in Boston, Metropolitan District Commission. We've put them together. I mean, it's going to save us several $1 million after 3 years once the initial cost of putting it just in computer system, the law, just in number of employees we can reduce. It was absolutely ridiculous in Massachusetts to have 4 police associations.
All right, some good work getting done. When we come back, we'll talk about that furlough payback. You know, all the state employees were cranking on about how they were forced to take a day off, and there was news coverage out the wazoo on this, folks. And, you know, they're losing money and they're losing money, but guess what? They're going to get paid back for that, and it's gotten absolutely very little attention. We'll talk about that and some of the things that got away from the legislature at the end of the year when we return with State Senator Brian Lees. Be right back. Being able to work the full work day through this new administration, some of the money-saving cuts that are made, and this forced 4-day work week and spreading over some furlough days. You're lucky you have jobs, you know that? They're getting the money back.
Well, in all fairness, and your baby to whatever you just called them, you know, and the crew is going wild here. It's hard to concentrate just so everybody realizes if I lose my train of thought. You want me to put
you can put that on if you don't like it, pal.
This is getting out of hand. But, you know, the state employees haven't had an increase in nearly 4 years, and this was while the governor felt, even though I voted for an increase and voted to override some of the things that the governor did from the pay raise standpoint, the governor felt that we do have some additional monies that have come in this year. He talked about that at the beginning of the year, and he said, I'll be able to fund that and give people in January checks back. It'll cost about $14 million overall, but he did that. It is interesting. I mean, we get a lot of calls when this happened. I can't tell you the number of calls I got when it happened. Virtually none.
No. Any
when
state
we finally voted for it and said thank you.
You see any state employees calling and saying, hey, thank you, Senator, and thank you, Governor, and da-da-da. And the media, I must say, who crawled all over this issue, big deal.
Oh, yeah, we were...
No attention whatsoever.
We had people camped out at our office at different times to talk about it, and it did not get a lot. But I'm glad for the state employees. I think it's something that's fair. I wish we could have done more, and we're going to have to renegotiate this other contract next year.
Well, there's a pay raise that is up on the agenda.
That did not get... I mean, we passed it, but the governor vetoed it with amendments, which means he can hold it until the session ends.
The governor is not giving any state employees a pay raise come heck or high water.
Not in... I mean, if people change their job classifications or downsize and they move people, then that is obviously happening on a regular basis anyway.
Right. But there's no across-the-board raises coming here.
Not in his mind. I think we've got to do something. I don't think it's fair to go this way.
Well, I always felt that the state employees were working for a company that wasn't doing well. They were doing what they had to do, meaning the new administration, to get this state into shape. And we're going to talk about how there's some actual monies that are actually not hanging around, but are in what this thing called surplus is starting to build again. But the thing that cracked me up about that whole public employees thing during that whole furlough deal was that the union leadership actually are the ones, in my judgment, that in these, you know, sort of not so negotiations, discussions that went on with the administration. They're the ones that excuse the term, screwed their own union employees, I think, by not looking at layoffs.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want any layoffs because they wanted to. How did that go?
Well, it depended on the union. Some of them said, we'll take layoffs, we won't take a pay cut.
But a lot
Other
of
ones said
they wanted protection for seniority of folks. So
we needed to
I'm sorry. They actually wanted to see the public employee unions. Let's see if I can get this straight.
They wanted to see some layoffs.
They wanted to see layoffs in lieu of the furloughs.
They did. I mean, we should be careful of how we say that. I mean, they didn't want to see layoffs, but there was some
in lieu
discussion.
Of furlough dollars.
There was some discussion of how you should restructure government. The governor said we've got to lay off and restructure government and do a better job with less people. Plus, we won't be able to do this. Now, there was some disagreement on how we were going to get to that point.
I guess
the bottom line is we had a state that was out of control. We're now fiscally beginning to get fiscally sound. We had to do that. We're the only industrial state in the nation that balanced our budget without new taxes. I mean, these are very big pluses.
I guess the point I wanted to make.
Bipartisan support.
I wanted to make this point. I didn't do it very well. It was a total mishap there at the beginning. But I knew what I wanted to say. I didn't say it properly. And the reason I'm making the point is because the administration doesn't get any credit for something that they solved in whole. They were looking to save some money. They had an option to lay off a lot of state employees. They chose not to, while the union leadership said we'd rather see some of the 9 seniority individuals laid off to keep the heavy hitters, long-term tenured union employees around. Instead, the governor went against that wave of concern from union leadership, created a furlough program. Then the whole union, blanked and moaned about the whole thing. But in the end, they're getting their money back. And I think we're not paying enough attention to Governor Wales' excellent move there.
Well, and one of the things that many of us, especially those of us in Western Mass, said to the governor is, we have a tough unemployment situation as it is. We would like to see how you can restructure with the least amount of layoffs. And in the end, he came back to us and said, look, I got to do this furlough or I'm going to have massive layoffs.
Right.
And I will tell you, I was more willing to have a 2-week furlough or a 9-day furlough for some people than massively laying off additional people in Western Mass. It wasn't fair.
It was also the human thing to do.
Absolutely. You couldn't. I mean, this isn't fair to say to somebody, oh, by the way, you're not going to have a job in a time that you can't probably find another job. Right. And so what we've tried to do is be as fair as we can. And that's why I say in the long run, I think it's been a successful year. Some of the things have been very difficult. Dan, they're not easy. It's not easy to make some of those votes, but you have to do it for the stability of everybody in the Commonwealth.
All right, a couple of things that got away. Let's see that list of things that time ran out on. Court reform, we don't have time for it. Unemployment insurance, death penalty, abortion, education, recycling. This argument over the death penalty, is that a perennial argument?
Well, it really isn't. What happened is the legislature and the public voted for the death penalty a number of years ago. Dukakis was so dead set against it that he blocked every attempt, and he could sustain the veto. No one could override it with the number of people. Now there is pretty well thought that there is enough people to support the death penalty in both houses.
Where do you stand?
To the governor. I'm for the death penalty and have been. And I feel it's a deterrent. You talk to many people in the law enforcement industry. They say that that's something that they would like to have an option. And, quite frankly, Dan, there are studies on both sides. People will tell you it is a deterrent. People will tell you it isn't. I happen to come down on the side that it potentially can be. And in talking to people in law enforcement or families of people that have been shot in the line of duty or killed, they tell me that they would like it, and they feel that maybe that split second something could have happened. So I'm more than willing to come down on that side. And I think we're ready. The problem is that many of these controversial items, we don't get through the legislature because they get bottled up in committee. Let's vote on them. If you're defeated, move on. I've always felt, you win some, you lose some. You try to do what's right for your district, but don't try to hide behind some committee move.
All right. Well, it's hard for the Senate to hide now that television cameras have been placed in chambers. We'll talk about that when we wrap up with State Senator Brian Lees. Stay with us. In a row on crime in the Springfield area. If you've got comments, questions, concerns, will you please send your note to Springfield Crime. It'll head up right on my desk, WGGB TV 40, P.O. Box 40, Springfield 01102-0040. Again, we're looking at the second full week in this month. about 10 days away. January, thank you, Fred, to be going at that. Boy, I'll tell you, crime in Greater Springfield, in your district and throughout, is just ever increasing. And there are some things that are going to have to hit the legislative session that are going to address this thing, I hope. Any thoughts?
Well, we had the juvenile justice bill, which is an area of maybe moving some juveniles into the adult courts. The governor is coming down strong on even moving in other areas. I think that will help. And obviously some mandatory sentencing and changing some of these areas.
Well, we do have a tough-on-crime governor. As a former U.S. attorney, he is very, very into that whole thing, fought the drug situation for a long time. Senate television, it's not as full-fledged as in the House, but it is something, we don't see it. How do we see it out here in Western Mass?
Well, I have to tell you, this is one area that I have been pushing. I think I asked for like 15 votes on it, worked the members day and night, and we finally got TV in the Senate. What it is...
Where do you see it?
Well, it's a feed situation. Any station can pick up the feed. It's just not like the House
and sync their ratings like that.
Yeah. Well, you could use it for news segment as opposed to run it against. But the House has just one station devoted to it all the time, and when it's not on the air, there's just a caption saying this is the House television station, channel 44. We haven't gotten to that level in the Senate, but at least we opened up the process. It was pretty disgusting, Dan, in the Senate. People would do things, not show up, not vote, try to hide behind some of the things they did, and it never got seen back home. That's an important thing. Before we go off the air, I want to tell you, I think Buffalo's going to win, and I'm with you guys from the behind them here. And I think you ought to put this on before you leave, because they're going to go after it.
Well, I'll review my predictions again tomorrow night, and once again...
And you'll remind everybody I picked Buffalo.
Prove that the state senator still... well, I won't say it. All right. You threw me. I had a great close coming up here.
I'm sorry.
Guess what we're doing tomorrow?
What are you doing tomorrow?
Rotaries.
Rotary, East Long Meadow Rotary, incredible. How many?
Why do you talk about it with such pride?
Well,
East Long Meadow Rotary is an embarrassment. It's in your district. What have you done about it? Anything? Nothing.
This has been a discussion for years in East Long Meadow of how to solve that. I think there's
you got to wear one of these when you drive through it.
7 areas coming in, but let me tell you something. The drivers in East Long Meadow are great drivers. Very few accidents there compared to other Rotaries.
He's out of here. State Senator Brian Lee. It's nice to have you, pal.
Good to be here. Buffalo.
Rotaries
your guy
tomorrow.
says 24.
Shut up, Buffalo.